Hi everyone, thanks for coming to this virtual talk today. My name is Jon Naft and I am happy to be invited by the wonderful team at NMO. It's a real pleasure to be back at the Australian National Meeting. I wish I were there in person like last year. Really met a lot of great people and learned a lot of wonderful things about O&P. So today I'm talking to you from Cleveland, Ohio in the United States. So if you look on the map right by the yellow arrow, I also commute a lot back and forth to Boston, which is Myomo's headquarters. I'm a certified prosthetist and orthotist and have been practicing in the States for quite a while. Today we're going to talk about some introductions to the MyoPro. We'll talk next about when you should fit it, so who's the ideal patient. We'll also talk about the best ways to train a patient. It's not uncommon to be creative with how you train patients on devices, but we'll show you some things that have worked well for us. And then we'll cover some functional activities that people do with the brace, and we'll close out with some really neat things about how patients can play video games using their device as a way to gain proficiency. Okay, so let's get right at it. Just like in the United States, when patients lose the ability to control their arm, there's not a whole lot of devices out there that can instantly and quickly restore function and movement to the arm. It's a very frustrating thing for patients. Many of them are often just left with no intervention at all for the upper extremity. Some of them just carry their arm around as if they were wearing a sling, or in fact wearing a sling like you see in the picture. It's always frustrated me as a provider and the orthotic side. Patients would come in, especially for AFOs, it's very common. By the numbers, roughly 83 to 87% of the patients that I see for stroke have some type of upper extremity impairment, and many of them have that left alone. When I was in Australia last time, we started to talk about this campaign for the orthotist to look up. So when these patients come into the office, even though your main intervention is providing AFOs for ambulation, take a look up at their upper extremity and see if there's things that you can do to help them. When I first started fitting MyoPros, I made a big comparison to those that are amputees that are wearing a prosthetic arm. If you think about it, someone who's missing their arm and someone who has an arm but can't use it, they share a lot of the same dysfunction and they share a lot of the same hardship. So for example, how could you carry two things if you're an amputee and you only have one functioning arm? So you get a myoelectric prosthetic, which has a powered elbow and a powered hand, which helps you restore function. So we're really doing the same thing here. In fact, the device that we're going to talk about today really functions very similar and in many ways the exact same as an electric prosthetic arm. So let me introduce you to this device called the MyoPro. It's really made and prescribed to support a weak arm and help patients get stronger, help patients improve to get better, and it's also a functional device. People often look at it as beginners and they think, well, which is it? Is it for function or is it for rehabilitation? And the truth is, it's really good for both. So here's a few things about the device. It has a rechargeable battery, which is built inside and is also removable. Each patient gets 2 batteries that come with the device. No patient has ever worn out a battery in a day. They last a long time. They're rechargeable, really nice batteries. The second thing is at the wrist. So the wrist is manual. You can turn the wrist for pronation and supination with your sound side, or you can pre-position it and fix it in that position. Same with flexion and extension. So you can flex the wrist and extend the wrist and keep it where it is in the best patient position. Most of our patients are unilateral, so they do use their contralateral side. Again, just like a myoelectric prosthetic. Each brace is custom made. You take a mold of your patient's arm, and each brace is formed directly to fit that patient's arm. It's very light. The device looks a little bit bulky because it's built around an arm, but they're somewhere in the neighborhood of anywhere from just under 3 pounds US to right around maybe 4.5 if you have a bigger one. The way the hand opens and closes the patient's hand is in a very basic 3-jaw chuck position. There's an elbow motor on the side, and the elbow motor allows for bending for flexion and extension. When the device is off, it's very easy, free to move. When the device is on, its default position is high resistance. The motor itself is not meant to pick up very strong objects. It's really used primarily for doing basic household activities of daily living. So you can pick up something like a jug of milk or a dinner dish or some laundry, but you won't be lifting any Australian cars anytime soon. It's not that strong yet. Let's talk about the hand motor. It sits on top of the dorsal plastic shell here. And we're going to talk next about where are the electrodes. So there are 4 electrodes that are built into the device. There are 2 which are down here at the wrist, and there are 2 up here. So your biceps, your triceps, your forearm flexors, and your forearm extensors. So I can give you a quick demo of how the device works. Okay, I'll show you on my hand. Right now, as you can see, my hand is fairly relaxed. I have the electrodes, by the way, hooked up to my arm. So the green line represents my grasp, my flexors, and the yellow line is for extensors. So when I am relaxed, you can see my EMG is low. Now as you watch me extend my hand, you see that yellow extensor go up. You can also see I just co-contracted. If I relax my hand, the EMG goes down. So when I turn the device on, now, of course, your patients aren't going to be able to do this as well as I can. This is just for demonstration today. It's a good way to actually test a patient to see if they have EMG or can have good volitional use. Okay, we're going to shut that down. Go back into the presentation. Okay, let's talk for a minute how it works. So the brace is designed so that you can wear it throughout the day. Almost every patient gets fit with a shoulder harness, just like a prosthesis, just like an above elbow prosthetic, because it'll help support the weight and it'll help improve some of the biomechanics of the device as well. So what happens first is the sensors, as you can see on the screen here, these sensors will detect the patient trying to move their hand. In many cases, they won't be able to move their hand or wrist or fingers against gravity, but the sensors will be able to detect just a trace of EMG. Next, the computer on the brain will interpret that EMG and turn the motors on, and patients then can control the brace volitionally. The brace never moves unless the patient really tries to make it do so. Now, who are the patients that I'm typically seeing? By far, the majority of the patients that I see with this device are stroke patients. In the United States, we have close to 850,000 people a year that have a stroke. We also have a lot of brachial plexus injury patients. The next third biggest category are patients with brain injury, and then the other categories such as MS, ALS, spinal cord injury, and some of our pediatrics are also growing. Here's some inclusion criteria. So who's a typical patient right down the middle of the fairway, as they say? So first, the patient has to have full passive range of motion. So picture your hand, for example. The motor on the brace is going to open your fingers and it's going to close your fingers. If your hand is contracted or you have too much spasticity, brace isn't going to be able to do that. So that's the first main criteria. Same with your elbow. If you have too much spasticity in the elbow or you have a contracture, the brace isn't going to be able to move you. Second, you have to have usable EMG, something that's also volitional. Next, as we mentioned, no contractures. You have to have good cognition. You have to be able to follow a command. I also think that it's important for all patients that we fit to attend therapy. Now, here are some of the benefits that we see kind of from just a high level. We really see the immediate restoration of range of motion. So most of our patients, as soon as they put the device on, with a few basic instructions, they're getting open and close at their hand, flex and extend at their elbow. Then over time, those patients will get stronger, so their muscle strength will improve. The biggest thing we also see is a decrease in spasticity, which we're going to talk about in training in a few minutes. But then we also are seeing that patients who are using the MyoPro fairly regularly are getting less overuse injuries with their opposite limb. So when you think about function for the device and how to train for it, it's very, very similar to what a prosthetic would have, with one exception. We get the chance now in O&P to also be therapeutic. So clearly restoring function is the main goal, but now as an orthotist, we get to help patients get stronger and improve their range of motion and the things that I just discussed on that last slide. And that's really important to me, and I think a lot of people in the field will enjoy that too. Most of my career I spent just accommodating patients. So for example, I'd fit an AFO so that I could prevent their foot drop. But it wasn't necessarily doing as much as I'd want to make them stronger and improve their range of motion, especially if the articulation at the AFO was locked. But now by wearing a MyoPro, our patients indeed get much stronger and they improve, and it's nice to be part of that team. In terms of the actual functional benefits, these are some of the things on the screen that I tend to see the most. I always joke around with my patients and I say, just so I could set realistic expectations, you're not going to play piano with this brace. Maybe in the future generations of this product, you'll be able to play piano or do some other high-level activities. But for now, it's really basic grasp. It's holding a basic object. It's holding your glasses. It's holding your cell phone. Those are the basic things that the MyoPro can really do for you. So as you can see on these pictures, one of the big things we get is cooking. So imagine if you're at home and you want to stir, let's say, a pot of spaghetti sauce. If you try with one hand and one arm just to stir the pot, the whole pot's going to try to move or it becomes a big mess. And now if you wear a MyoPro, these patients can use the MyoPro side to stabilize the food and then stir with their sound side. The other thing that I really notice patients doing, if you look at the picture down here in this lower left, turning on light switches, opening doors, hitting elevator buttons, those were really big things that most people really didn't think would be such a big deal to them, but as it turns out they are. Especially, here in the United States, we're really rolling into fall right now. You guys are rolling into spring. You're so lucky. But here in the US, the leaves are starting to turn colors outside. The temperature's starting to go down. And where I live, we get tons of snow. We'll have snow in the feet pretty soon. So if you like winter, come and visit me. But anyway, back to this picture on the left. Imagine if you're walking out to your car and you have a small bag of groceries in your arm and you can't move your other arm. You would have to put your groceries down on the ground in order to open up the door. And in the winter here, that's a pretty messy task. So it's nice to be able to carry something with your MyoPro and then open the door. There's another thing too with mobility that's important. Imagine a patient who is using their cane, they're walking over to their kitchen table, and they want to pick up a dish and put it back on the counter to clean up the kitchen. In order to do that, you're going to have to let go of your cane. And if you let go of your cane, your risk for fall starts to go up. We've been starting to track the number of changes in falls as a result of people wearing MyoPro, and it's really a significant thing. When patients fall, the number of times that they get hurt because if they fall towards their affected side, they can't put their affected arm up to block the fall. So they end up hitting their head, broken collarbones, shoulder injuries, and other trauma. And from the economic standpoint, it's almost more expensive when the patient's being readmitted for a secondary fall than sometimes the primary diagnosis itself. Okay, next, I'm going to call your attention to this middle screen for two reasons. The first was we had a lot of fun in the office when we were practicing with this. So we really wanted to know, can a patient go grocery shopping with their MyoPro? So we borrowed a grocery cart from the grocery store. We did return it. And then we simulated grocery shopping in the office. So patients would push the grocery cart down the halls in the office, and they would go inside and take objects out. So you can do these functional tasks. Last but not least, we have a lot of patients reporting laundry use and other activities such as vacuuming and things that are repetitive tasks. One of my favorite stories comes from a patient who was first learning to use a MyoPro, and they were doing some of these functional tasks at home, and they were doing them very, very slowly. And they looked at me and they said, Jon, you know, I'll just get my significant other to go ahead and do these things for me because it's taking me too long. So I looked at the patient and I looked at the patient's AFO and I said, hey, I see you're wearing an AFO. Patient says, yes. I said, when you first got your AFO, how was your walking? Were you good at it, or did you have to go very slowly? Did it take a long time? I bet it was pretty frustrating. And the patient said, yes, it was. It was so hard. But, you know, I've been wearing it every day and I've been walking. I've been getting so much better. So I smiled at the patient. I said, so if you wear it every day and you're willing to work hard with it, you're going to get stronger, right? So the patient said, oh, I see what you're doing. And I said, of course. So we do encourage our patients to do a lot with the device. And we also find that when they wear it every day for a consistent number of time or hours in the day or even minutes sometimes, that's what's important, is the consistency. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. So here is a sample of some function, and then we'll talk about how do you train your patients so that they can be functional. So let's click on this. So these are some examples of the basic things people do for function in their home. So this is a patient who had a favorite thing to do, have a yogurt snack in the evening, and he was so happy to be able to simply just hold the yogurt by the cup instead of struggle with it, or ask his family members to come over and open the yogurt for him. You know, being independent is a big deal, and it really helps people feel confident. So just like in Australia, just like in the US, sorry, it's good to have a team. Your physician, your therapist, your prosthetist, and orthotist should all work together and communicate as often as possible. Now, when it comes to training your patients, the best way to really train them is go systematically. Start with bicep mode, then move to tricep mode, then move to dual mode. Same thing at the hand. You're going to start with closed mode, then move to open mode, then move to dual mode. If you try to get the patient to use all of the modes quickly at the same time, they're going to struggle. So for example, in closed mode, which is the same as bicep mode, your hand would be closed. I'll show you here on the device. So when your hand is closed, the device is closed. And then when you relax your hand, the device will open all by itself too. So imagine in the case of spasticity, okay, I'll give you a live shot of it here. So my hand is relaxed, now closed. Now here's your spastic patient just with one electrode in closed mode. When they relax their hand, So you tell your patient, hey patient, take a breath, relax your hand, try not to squeeze. And when they do that, the motor will open. They can close again, relax, and it will open. So it's just one electrode, and it's actually powering on when the patient relaxes. So we usually spend sometimes 2 to 3 to 4 weeks in closed mode and bicep mode, just teaching the patient to fire the muscle, relax the muscle, one at a time. Now, in the case of your hand, if you've trained your patient to relax this flexor, then you train them to use the extensor to strengthen. And in most cases, if you switch to a dual mode too quickly, in other words, both electrodes on, they're going to try to open their hand, but they co-contract, and that co-contraction stops them from opening their hand. So here's a graphic illustration of how we do this with the electrodes. So closed mode, the sensor is there. Bicep mode, the sensor is right there in the center of your bicep. Open mode, it's on the back of your forearm. And tricep mode, it's obviously right there in the middle of your tricep. So train the patient systematically, one set of electrodes at a time. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk to you today is about this thing that I've really been enjoying called gameplay. So instead of just having your patient do open, close, bend your elbow, straighten your elbow, they can actually play games using their arm, but instead of holding a joystick, the arm itself is the joystick, and their EMG controls the game. So they're fun to play. They can also be used to evaluate and test your patient. The games also teach proficiency, so it helps your patient go from mode to mode, electrode to electrode, because the game itself is almost masquerading as therapy and instruction. I also use the game's data as a means of outcome measures. So the game stores everything from the play session, and it loads it back onto your device so that you can read it and you can know how much your patient has been playing, and you can use those game scores as outcomes. Now, what I'm really excited and working towards is a global community of MyoPro game players. So I'll be really happy to see when an Australian game player is playing against an American and they're having fun and getting their arms better from all the way across the globe. That'll be neat, and that's coming. Also, therapists like the games because it's growing rapidly in their space too, and they like to have their patients practice these games and get outcomes at home. So I'm going to show you an example of the game, how it works. So we partnered with Lucio, an Australian company, and converted their games to EMG. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to select my Bluetooth device, which is 1099 there. Okay, and I'm going to select a patient. So in this case, I'm just going to say myself. I'm going to hit next. And here's the really good part too. So you can set goals for your patient. So I'm going to set a goal here of just 1 minute for the hand. So I'm going to create a new goal. You have this little robot here, so I'm going to click on the hand, and I'm going to drop this time all the way down to 1 minute. So then you have a nice avatar on the screen that helps you make sure that everything is working. So as you can see, the avatar is working, so you can just practice with the avatar before playing the game. So now let's get at it. Save and play. We're going to play basketball. I'm going to play on the easy one. show you just what happens when the game starts getting harder. Trip back. All right, so we'll wrap up here with a final slide just to show you that we've been working hard on our published research. So we've had a few more studies come out. If you're interested in those, you can get a hold of me or talk to the great team at NMO. And with that, I will wrap it up. I want to say thanks very much again for joining me on this. And I hope that you have an interest in growing into a new space such as myoelectric bracing. It's been really wonderful for me. I enjoy working with the patients and the device. And a big shout out to the team there at NMO. They're just a pleasure to work with, and I'm lucky to collaborate with them. So enjoy the rest of the conference, and hopefully next year I'll see you live down under, as they say. Thanks, everyone.